Well, hello there. It is great to see you again, and welcome back to another installment of Path to Abundant Living. I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's great to have you with us here today. And as always, we've got the stars of our show, Mr. Matt Norbin and Scott Morrison of Morrison Norbin and Associates, joining us today for another wealth management related discussion. Today, we're diving back into family wealth. I know you guys, if you're frequent listeners or viewers of our show here, we've addressed different circumstances surrounding family wealth, the wealth planning strategies that go into family wealth. Today, we're talking about this, the idea of inheritances. We're circling back to this idea because there's this one element of it that we didn't necessarily touch on in a prior episode where we did walk through just kind of the act of preparing an heir for that day that the inheritance comes. Today, what we're doing is we're talking about the values that come along with the wealth. So let's zoom out for a quick second. For many affluent families, the thought is bound to have crossed their mind about that day that, of course, the wealth, a significant level of assets are going to be transferred to that future generation. But oftentimes, parents or grandparents, they're not necessarily considering the values and having those be transferred down to those future generations as well. And when I'm talking about values, I'm talking about those same values that help build and grow and maintain that wealth to begin with. So today, that's what we're examining. We're getting right into the idea of transferring financial values to heirs. And of course, just how to do it. These are conversations that Scott and Matt have with their clients on a regular basis. We're going to bring that conversation right to you here today. So that being said, let's go ahead and bring the guys out and get today's conversation rolling. Matt, Scott, good to see you guys. Welcome aboard.
Great to see you. Good morning to you, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we are sitting down on St. Patty's Day to record today's episode. Guys, let's get right into it. Matt, I'll throw this first opening question to you. Inheritors, they inherit the wealth, right? But not necessarily those important values and principles that go along with the money. What issues, what challenges trend, and you typically see when this happens, when those values aren't necessarily transferred in addition to the wealth itself?
Well, Ryan, there can be this values vacuum that can happen, which can potentially cause some big problems for the heirs that inherit that large sum of money. And too often they'll blow right through the inheritance. Some kids might become complacent thinking, there's wealth that can it'll just bail me out of trouble, which we know generally doesn't work that way. They might never develop resiliency and motivation and other life skills to overcome any adversity and generate their own success. And we've seen numerous stories in the media of affluenza, the feeling that, the rules don't apply to me because, we have so much. I don't have to follow the rules of society or the laws that are out there. And so if you got to be careful of this vacuum that can occur.
Sure. So Scott, my follow-up question for you guys then would be, are there certain types then of heirs or individuals really that just tend to do a better job maybe when it comes to avoiding the types of issues that Matt just mentioned?
Well, we do tend to see that the super rich and the ultra wealthy, tend to do a better job than others. I think that's probably because it's a day-to-day ongoing issue for them. So it's understandable that these kind of families with sizable wealth are good at this sort of thing. But it's not limited to the ultra wealthy. We also find that close families with strong relationships do a better job. There's just better open communication within those families, and they tend to have those kind of discussions. So much time and effort is spent around the issues of their wealth, and it's a regular day-to-day issue in their lives. They also have plenty of ways to show their kids, that connection between those values and that sense of purpose. They may have a successful business that they can actually directly involve their kids in, or they might have a single family office where there's tends to be professionals like attorneys and CPAs and things walking around the halls that these kids have an opportunity to rub elbows with and learn from. So being able to show the whys behind the decisions that the family money makes is super important, and an advantage that the ultra wealthy heirs have. But the good news is that it definitely doesn't take tens of millions of dollars to take a page from the playbook of these people, and that you can effectively help your heirs adopt the values, and you can serve them well throughout their lives by having those kind of conversations.
Roger that, Scott. So Matt, I'll throw this next one over to you. Let's get into that first step, what it takes to get this process started. What would you say is that first step that those of us who intend to transfer money and those values to our kids and grandkids down the road, what does that first step look like?
Well, so if you haven't already kind of figured it out, you want to know what are your own values and attitudes towards wealth and success. And so which of those values do you want to then pass on to your kids and grandkids, and that are around the different behaviors of saving and spending and investing and working and being charitable, and then share those with your heirs. And so starting with self-reliance and the ability to, quote unquote, stand on your own 2 feet, and education, like the appreciation of the value of higher learning and critical thinking, the ability to navigate through challenges, which we are all going to face multiple times in our lives, and fiscal prudence, the knowledge of how to live within your means, make smart financial decisions, and grow your wealth over time. And motivation, be motivated, the drive to work and to achieve and work hard each and every day. And finally, philanthropy, knowing that being able to help others, maybe who are less fortunate and need support. And the key is to get clear in your own mind, or you and your significant other, of what your values that you really want to pass on to your kids and grandkids, and keep in mind that they're going to develop, your heirs are going to develop their own values about wealth and success. And so that's where you want to kind of look and say, okay, where is their alignment whenever possible, and just continually understand your own values and then theirs as well. And again, see how they work together.
Certainly, and that's a good little list that you drew up there for us, Matt. So it sounds like to me, guys, then it's from a matriarch or patriarch standpoint, it's once you get clarity on your own viewpoint on those key values that you just listed, then you work to start communicating those and trickling them down so that you can have that dialogue between, the heirs, and so that they can get on the same page with how you feel about those values. But my question then, Scott, I'll throw this over to you. How do you communicate those values? How do you go through that process of transferring all those years of knowledge and internal feelings about those, those key values down to your heirs? How do you start? How do you go about that?
I mean, simply, it's ongoing conversation. It has to be kind of the kind of conversation that becomes comfortable within the family, something that you would anticipate if you're sitting at the kitchen table. Subjects about money and values are obviously so important, and so you have to begin to instill those beliefs and hopes, and so it has to happen in those conversations. You want to maintain open lines of communication, not only with your children, but if you're fortunate to have grandchildren like myself, to be able to start to instill those values in them, because a lot of estate planning is incorporating generation skipping type of trusts and things like that. And so you want to make sure that not only your children but your grandchildren are included in these conversations. You want to communicate, as Matt said, you want to communicate the values that you care about. And you want to explain why those values are so important to you, and how those values can then be, for your kids and grandkids, how they can realize a good life by way of that same value system. Having said this, it can't be just a single one and done talk. I mean, no matter how impactful that conversation might be, is something that needs to be, like I said, ongoing. And sometimes you're talking to very small children, so it needs to be age appropriate. And then as they mature and grow, you can start to add more value to that conversation, and start talking about things like, investment strategies and charitable giving as they become adult children. But sometimes it's as simple as just simply setting up a piggy bank and having them add some money, and then matching it like you would a 401k, so that they can kind of start to see that that value of saving and what it, what wealth, how wealth can be created.
I love that, and it's it's starting that dialogue, getting that going. But as we've probably all heard in our lives, I mean, both you guys, of course, anybody who's watching and tuning in today, uh, timing. Timing is a big factor when it comes to having pivotal conversations in our lives. So, Matt, would you say that there are any ideal times or moments really when these types of conversations are most likely to resonate with an heir or really hit home with them?
So yeah, there's no shortage of teachable moments over the years, like Scott was alluding to. First and foremost is consistently communicate, over time, and help your kids and grandkids, and if you have them, develop that sense of responsibility and motivation to achieve. And so when those teachable moments arise, is maybe talk about, okay, that teachable moment might be, hey, you just got that large check, or a birthday check, like Scott was saying, hey, let's put some money in that piggy bank. And or maybe it's as they get a little bit older and they're looking to buy their first home or a rental property. Most people tend to not remember or internalize these lessons that are only taught once, right? A lot of people and have family members who are, it's learned by doing, or it's that repetition and revisiting the topic of money and values over time. And so one excellent technique is storytelling. Talk about, maybe you have a grandfather or a close family member who had to sacrifice to build what is now a successful business. Or maybe you yourself, had some maybe less than ideal investments or opportunities that you did, and you've learned a lot because of that. So telling stories helps internalize these different lessons. And again, it's as Scott was saying, and you too, Ryan, it's just continually communicating over time, where these teachable moments come up and say, oh, remember when and how we talked about. And if you just continually do that over and over, that those personal stories can drive home those lessons better than vague lectures.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, in fact, there are strategic moments to be able to have these conversations resonate. I like that you brought up stories. I mean, stories are so important and so good. I mean, they're memorable. I mean, hey, that's why we talk about good stories all the time. So, a good point there, Matt. Guys, I get that communication that plays a very pivotal role in this process of transferring those values to your future generations, but what about any action steps, like actual actions that can be taken? Scott, I'll throw this one over to you. Do you have any, specific actions that a matriarch or patriarch, even grandparents, could take to help start, instilling these values in their future generations?
Well, Ryan, as vital as those values focused conversations are with your heirs, the most effective way to instill those values is to obviously what our parents have done for ourselves, and that's to model that behavior. My dad was always famous for saying, you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And so while you can have some great conversations, if it's not backed up with real action, then it's not as impactful. So whenever you can involve your kids in some real financial decisions, and obviously, again, they need to be age appropriate, but things like where you're going to take a vacation, where the kids can get involved in at least how that vacation is, how the cost is put together, how to stay within a budget. Older children, you can start to talk about, as Matt said, with charities, what are the family charities? Maybe there should be some discussion about not just your own charities, but what would the kids get them involved in doing some of the research themselves into what those charities are all about, what their mission statements are, so that it gets them, some real life experience in making financial decisions based around that value system that your family has. You can demonstrate the power of saving and compounding, like I said, with young kids, just that piggy bank story with the matching money. But then, you can also, live those values out loud, by being really smart with their money and actually actively doing that, by participating in the kind of things that you're going to invest your money in. So whenever you can have those opportunities for practical application, again, being age appropriate, it's very impactful.
Scott, I love that. And guys, I pulled a unique statistic that I wanted to read off to you guys. And this is from the Family Business Center. By some estimates that they have, family firms comprise about 90% of all business enterprises in North America these days. That being said, do you guys have any advice for those families that own a business together? I know we've chatted a little bit about this in some prior episodes, but given that we're on the topic of values and family wealth, I figured this is worth bringing back up for those that may have missed that conversation. Matt, do you have any advice for families that work together to own and manage and maintain a business?
Sure, Ryan. So expounding kind of on what Scott said of passing on lessons, one seemingly obvious path of conveying your values and instilling those in your kids or grandkids is to involve them in the family enterprise, in that business, and they can see firsthand the principles of hard work and thoughtful decision making in action and gain valuable hands-on experience. Now, it can certainly make sense, for example, of involving the younger kids in the business in various positions to help them see the importance of being motivated to do a good job and work their way up the ladder. And then it can also, they can see that with the many areas of business, depending on the size of it, can be 3 or 4 areas, or really complex about how all of these areas need to work together and to achieve this success. And no one, even mom and dad, can do it all. And so it can then, when you kind of transition to older kids, they can start looking at financial statements, profit and loss, and other financial documents. Now, you want to maybe tread lightly or a little carefully, because you don't want to force your kids into the family business, because if they have no interest whatsoever, then that can backfire, and they might then resent those values that you're trying to instill in them and say, well, I'm not going to do that, or that's totally different from what I want. So you want to expose your kids to the business, but not pressure them to come aboard. So, for example, our younger daughter has expressed, she's a freshman in college, has expressed an interest in coming into our business. Well, myself and my wife, we are encouraging her in college to go and learn about a lot of different areas and look at different avenues, and not only say, oh, I'm going to come and work in the business. So like, nope, go out and learn in a lot of different areas and really figure out what it is that you want to do before saying, okay, yeah, I want to be in this business.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great, Matt. I appreciate you kind of sharing your own personal experience with that, because we had talked about action steps, and boy, is that a really great action step. Opening up the opportunity at least to teach lessons and values about how the family business is run, and get them thinking in that way, get them acclimated to those values. Is a really good point in how you can kind of utilize the own family business to expose them to those values. Guys, as we're bringing our conversation here to a head, I'll throw this over to both of you. Maybe you both can provide a little something here for us. Let's leave our audience with any additional pro tips, maybe, for those families that want to ensure that, not only does the wealth get passed on to future generations, but also those values and those strong principles that they've developed over their lifetime. Scott, we'll start with you, but I'll throw it your guys' way. Any other pro tips you might want to share before we leave, we cap off our episode today?
Well, the one that I try to encourage with my clients, and I wish they would take advantage of more, honestly, is incorporating their trusted advisor into those brainstorming ideas, where I can maybe offer some ideas on how those family conversations can go, which might even lead to some opportunities where somebody like myself or one of their other trusted professionals can be part of a family discussion about their wealth. I think that's something that isn't done nearly enough. because the advisor for the parents isn't necessarily introduced to the family. And so I think when you're talking about wanting to set up an estate plan, that means there's going to be some sort of continuation of that plan, to have that advisor who's intimately aware of that plan, having them involved, I think is real important. I think then one other last thing is then making sure that you're talking about wealth and values. It doesn't automatically mean that you're going to open up your books to your kids. You don't need to avoid talking about wealth because you think it's going to lead to needing to open up those books and show them, what they potentially might be inheriting. I think it's more important that you're having those discussions and the importance about being a good steward of the wealth without, diving into the actual numbers.
Mm-hmm. Good point. And Matt, any final thoughts from you on this end?
Sure, Ryan. Along with, again, what Scott was saying is the communicating, and communicate to your kids and if possible your grandkids about your values, about wealth and success, and understand that won't guarantee that you'll avoid negative outcomes or that they're going to become the world's greatest CEO. But in our experience, heirs who understands how their parents and grandparents view these things, these issues, they tend to be more driven to make their way in the world and be better stewards of the assets that they're going to receive, and then use these in meaningful ways and lead meaningful lives to help build stronger communities, rather than, hey, I'm just going to blow it on a new Lamborghini. And, the key, as we've, talked about, to kind of wrap it up here, the key is to make this happen is start talking with your heirs as soon as possible and keep that engagement going consistently over the long term.
So many times, guys, I feel like that's what we're leaving our audiences with. Just start somewhere. And a lot of the time it's start with, as Scott mentioned, working with your trusted advisor, get them on the horn, see what their viewpoints on how they could kind of steer you into some of these conversations, these lessons, these moments that can really, add value to your heirs' lives in the long run. So guys, a lot of good stuff today. I appreciate you carving some time out of your day to be with us. For anybody in the audience that's, taking something away from today's conversation, maybe you yourself are in a situation where maybe it's time to start thinking about this. And maybe you're interested in reaching out to Matt and Scott, having a conversation, just getting your own unique circumstances in front of them. Matt, Scott, what would you say is the best way somebody could go ahead and reach out to you guys and get that ball rolling?
To start, not to be cliched, but really start, email, go to the website, morrisonnordman.com, or give us a call, 517-333-7967, and let's have a conversation and point you down the path, help you achieve that's most important to you. And if it's passing on these values to your kids or grandkids, let's start by having a conversation.
Awesome. Well, guys, again, thank you for carving some time out of your day to be with us, and looking forward to having you back on the next one.
Thanks, Ryan. Have a great day.
You too, Ryan. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys. And hey, look, we want to take one final moment. As always, thank you guys, our audience, for being aboard the show with us today. If you took something away from it, you benefited from the conversation, do us a favor, go ahead and comment on the show, subscribe to it on whichever platform you're checking us out on. And then, of course, share this information with friends and family, business owners, anybody that you think would benefit from these types of discussions that we're having. Because like I said at the top of the show, these are the same conversations and strategies, solutions, you name it, that Matt and Scott are having with their clients on a regular basis. We're just bringing them here to you on this show because they're pertinent topics that can help put you and yours on that path to abundant living. We've got some great conversations still teed up for you in episodes to come, and we'd hate to have you miss out really on any of that beneficial information. So for Matt and Scott, I'm Ryan Ruff. We're going to go ahead and say so long today, but we appreciate you being with us on today's installment of Path to Abundant Living.